The denuclearization talks between Pyongyang and Washington have hit a stalemate since top DPRK leader Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump's second summit in Vietnam in February ended without a deal. So what are the challenges in resolving the current impasse? To what extent will U.S. and South Korean domestic politics impact their approach towards the DPRK? And what are the resources the ROK may leverage to improve inter-Korean relations? To discuss these issues more, I'm very happy to be joined by Mr. Jong Chen, Chairman of the Korean Peninsula Future Forum. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. In this part of our program, I'm happy to be joined here by His Excellency Ambassador Jong Chen. Welcome to our dialogue, sir.
It's glad to be here.
Look, the latest working level talks between the DPRK and the United States in Stockholm broke down with no agreement. The DPRK said the United States brought nothing to the table, and it will not engage in sickening negotiations unless the U.S. changes its hostile policy. Here is obviously the issue of the frosty issue of mistrust between the DPRK and the United States. Given the adversity of the current circumstances, what do you think of the prospects of resuming any serious negotiations about denuclearization in the Korean Peninsula?
Well, I think mistrust is nothing new. It has been there all along, and I think it will continue to be there for many years to come. I don't think mistrust stands in the way of serious negotiations, but I'm inclined to see North Korea's position there as part of their negotiating tactic, and it's not unfamiliar to me. I've been negotiating with them for many years, and there's nothing surprising to me. This is part of an opening gambit for serious negotiations.
But what do you think of the demand by the DPRK that economic sanctions should first and foremost be lifted before the resumption of any serious negotiations? So with economic sanctions and the war games taking place under the nose of the DPRK, they feel extremely uncomfortable.
Well, when they come out to the negotiating table in the beginning, they take a maximalist approach. They come up with the highest demands they can think of. So U.S. can never come with a position that could satisfy North Korea. So that's how the negotiations begin. And we know that what North Korea needs most is sanctions relief, because that actually give them a lot of pain and make economic development very difficult. So that's I think highest on their priority as part of the deal. But for the U.S., they want to hold what the most important leverage for the U.S. to denuclearize North Korea, to get the nuclear weapons and missiles and fissile material. These are most important assets that North Korea has. If U.S. just gives away the leverage that North Korea cares most at the outset, they may be afraid that once they get the sanctions lifted, North Korea will lose interest in moving forward. But I think if North Korea can, as a starting point, if North Korea can agree to a nationwide freeze on fissile material production, fissile material, plutonium or highly enriched uranium, which can be used in nuclear weapons. That's, I think, the starting point. If North Korea can agree, we have a long way to go for the full denuclearization, but as a starting point to stop the production, any additional production of fissile material, then I think U.S. can be more flexible on sanctions relief. They cannot lift all the sanctions in the beginning.
We understand.
But I think they can begin with some important steps toward sanctions relief.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, at the very beginning, both sides need to work very hard to build their trust, to build confidence. Having said this, with the U.S.-led economic sanctions in place, why do you think China starts to get close to the DPRK, and Chairman Kim Jong-un visited China many times in a short period of time? What do you think of the rapprochement in the bilateral ties between People's Republic of China and the DPRK?
Well, from the standpoint of negotiating strategy, Kim Jong-un may believe that, demonstrating that China is behind them, standing behind them on their side, strengthens his negotiating position. So whether, in the summit meeting between Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, whether they had quarrels or not, at least giving the impression that North Korea and China stand together and they closely coordinate their positions. That is deemed by North Korea to strengthen its position. So I think that's nothing unusual.
But what do you think of the mixed feelings on the Chinese side? Look, this year we commemorate the 70th anniversary of the official ties between the DPRK and China. When the trade war is gaining momentum, despite the recent successful conclusion of a partial progress in the 13th round of the trade talks between the U.S. and China, China feels the pains of a security dilemma in Northeast Asia, and therefore it's pretty natural for China, which is often spoken of by Western media as the only ally of the DPRK since the Korean War, to get close to Pyongyang so that we can leverage our geopolitical influence and to minimize the impact of the geopolitical rivalry that Washington imposes on China since Trump took office.
I don't know how that will play into the bigger game, but I think China has every reason not to give the impression that China is behind North Korea and in strengthening, in making North Korea's position inflexible.
Instead, we supported the UN economic sanctions against the DPRK,
right.
And we demanded that we have a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula.
And if North Korea is not flexible and is not even flexible enough to agree to a total freeze of its fissile material production, then U.S. may suspect that China is playing North Korea card to strengthen its position in bilateral negotiations with the U.S. I don't think that's the case, but I wouldn't exclude the possibility that U.S. may interpret that way. So, I think China's interest is better served when, there's a progress in denuclearization, when North Korea is more forthcoming on.
But the DPRK does need to have security assurance from whatever major player, because it's surrounded by a culture of fears, whatever interpretations you have about the fears that the Koreans in the northern part face. Let's look at the other issue, Ambassador Jong. Both President Donald Trump and President Moon Jae-in are in trouble, in a sense, because Trump faces a fast expanding impeachment inquiry, and Mr. Moon Jae-in will have to handle the lowest approval rating since he took office. Now, at this difficult moment for both leaders, how do you forecast the process of nuclear disarmament or denuclearization on our periphery of the PRC?
I don't know how the domestic dilemma that Presidents Trump and Moon Jae-in face will impact on the process of denuclearization. I think they are more likely to have a negative impact.
But both President Donald Trump and President Moon Jae-in are eager to look for a victory, a win. ahead of, ahead of us finding a solution to their own individual problems, right?
Yeah, they need some achievements.
Yeah, to show off the morale of their own camp.
Front, and maybe Trump is more desperate to distract the attention of the American voters from the impeachment, issues to the foreign policy issue. So he may need, a big achievement in nuclear front. But if he makes a hasty and faulty deal with North Korea, that could make his domestic political situation more difficult. That could invite more severe criticism from Democrats or those who oppose him. So I think there is less room of maneuver, less flexibility for President Trump in dealing with North Korea. So unless there is a chance to have a decent deal that he can market, that helps in getting stronger support from the American people, I think he will be very careful, and he wouldn't take any additional political liability by getting into a controversial deal that doesn't really stop North Korea's nuclear buildup. So a partial freeze or anything that doesn't really guarantee the nationwide freeze as a starting point of the fissile material production will not be received favorably by the American voters. So even if he desperately needs diplomatic victory, and I don't think he has anywhere else to expect that kind of victory. And that kind of domestic dilemma makes North Korea miscalculate. And I think that's one of the reasons why North Koreans came up with such a condescending position in Stockholm, very strong position that they can never sell to the Americans.
Whatever implications of the hostage-taking approach, as you said wisely, we saw symbolic progress by all three leaders, Mr. Kim Jong-un, President Donald Trump, and President Moon Jae-in, to cross the 38th parallel many years after the Korean War was concluded. I thank you so much for briefing us in a very professional way about the process of denuclearization and particularly the vulnerabilities concerning the prospects. We appreciate your insightful analysis. Thank you so much. Very convincing. Northeast Asia is known for instability. What's your basic concept about the threat assessment in this particular region?
For the South Koreans' perspective, the most challenging, important single variable is the U.S.-China strategic competition. The United States and China are both very important, critical to South Korea's survival.
Welcome to Dialogue, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Northeast Asia is known for instability. When you look at either the process of denuclearization, the missile tests, or the latest escalation of tensions between ROK and Japan, to say nothing of the geopolitical rivalry between China and the United States over Taiwan or South China Sea. What's your basic concept about the threat assessment in this particular region?
For the South Koreans' perspective, the most challenging, important single variable is the U.S.-China strategic competition, which really, destabilized current international order. And still, we haven't yet found any other alternative. So it really gave us really big challenges how to adjust to the new coming, international order. And the second one is of course, the problem of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula issues. Third one is the uncertain path of Chinese foreign policy orientation these three variables are the most important and challenging, variable to South Korea.
We are sweetly surprised that the ROK has sent a senior military delegation to attend the Xiangshan Forum. At the same time, you're an ally of the United States. All of the other allies failed to send their senior delegation. What's the symbolic implication that your country delivers to the rest of the world through this high-profile participation in the Chinese equivalent of the Shangri-La Security Dialogue on regional security?
For South Korea's interest, the United States and China are both very important, critical to South Korea's survival. South Korea's foreign policy is to maintain the current South Korea-US alliance, as well as the South Korea and China strategic cooperative partnership. Both countries cannot replaceable in terms of their security and then also economy. So South Korea really try to have a good relationship with the United States and China, even in the period of the US-China strategic competition. We are going to do our best. The no-deal talk in Hanoi, Vietnam, failed to deliver the breakthrough that we had long expected. And therefore, we start to see increasing unpredictability. I'm not talking about the uncertain presidency of Donald Trump. What do you think of, say, the fact of a third party that may have added to the growing uncertainty in this region? As you mentioned, currently the Trump factor is the most challenging, actually, the factors uncertain. And then, so that's why I most frequently go to the United States instead of going to China these days. And then, but
why do you visit the United States so often? Were you there to figure out the latest change in the White House? I mean, domestic politics of the United States, because the election is coming. And do you think this is the context, this is the precondition for whatever unpredictable changes in the United States?
Yeah, in the past, actually, China was the factors which is uncertain for us. And also, we frequently come to see and how Chinese domestic politics as well as foreign policy orientations moving. But now, the United States is in a kind of chaotic situations. And even people in the United States divide, kind of quite, difficult to understand each other in some sense, and then also different orientation of foreign policy as well. And so it is extremely difficult to see the poll as well as the real, orientation of voters, the preference, which seems to be quite different in some sense. So we try to understand the domestic politics of the United States in the just front of the presidential election next year. So which will influence tremendously the U.S. Foreign policy orientation, even the U.S.-ROC alliance.
But we are worried that the preemptive unilateral policy moves by the White House and the Trump administration could be viewed as a serious return to the Cold War. And it's a new Cold War. The Iron Curtain is descending very quickly on Northeast Asia. So you have good reasons to be worried about our efforts to somehow rebalance the hegemonic impulse of the United States.
No matter what it happened, no matter which side win, even in the Cold War, South Koreans' perspective is a disaster. So we don't want to have that kind of the Cold War like world. So we really prefer the harmonious world between the United States and China, and then also the China must worry about the U.S. the new approach to to get the support from the North Korea to check China, and that's kind of a very complicated situation now. So it's much better for China to have a strategic communication with South Korea, And also, I'm quite sure the South Korea, even Japan, doesn't want to face that kind of Cold War, and then also doesn't want the United States to, take the unilateral measure against North Korea, especially in militarily. So this is the new world, which is quite different from the Cold War, with the military confrontation, and then also the try to force the other collapse and the kind of. So we have to find a way out to live together and coexist. No country cannot force the other to the way they want in this kind of new world.
You mean this world is increasingly dependent on interconnectivity and interdependence economically, particularly between RK, which is a strong regional economy, and China, the second biggest. Let's look at the shadow of Assad. The missile shield program that was deployed in the RK, which immediately caused an uproar of anger from the Chinese side. Do you think our suspicions and the haunting specter of mistrust have completely disappeared from the public radar?
For the Assad issues, both had a very serious lessons actually, and then China forced the South Korea to take the Chinese perspective and maybe interest, and then, but we could not. And then also South Korea didn't really seriously pay attention to the China's interest. So it cost a lot for both sides.
You mean it's a matter of a misunderstanding between the two sides on the issue of Assad? You mean you failed to completely grasp the depth and skill of the Chinese concerns about Assad?
I do not think there was a misunderstanding, but the kind of organizers' interest, and then also the narrowed interpretation of security, and then also some in Korean's perspective some arrogance from Chinese side. But for Korean, maybe for us, South Koreans, they maybe little understanding of the maybe paying respect to the Chinese concern, and all the combined these kind of variables caused the kind of problem. But the problem, the more important problem is the INF treaty withdrawal, and then the.
But the spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Ministry has made it very clear: we won't be part of the nuclear disarmament campaign that both the European leaders and the United States initiated following the unilateral withdrawal of the United States from the INF. Having said this, what about the latest development concerning your efforts to suspend the military intelligence sharing pact with Japan due to the territorial disputes? What kind of impact will that deliver to the neighboring countries?
GSOMIA was a kind of instant information sharing pact among the South Korea and the United States, Japan and North Korea. But actually the reality of the information sharing, the amount, is quite small between the South Korea and the Japan. But Japan utilized their leverage of economy to achieve their goal, political goal, maybe domestic political goal, and I mean on history issues, and then they removed the South Korea from the white list, and then also in the name of the security concern, and so we respond to that accordingly. But there is a hidden message. Actually, the South Korea didn't really seriously face this kind of clashes between neighbors. So ask maybe the United States to intervene and then to stop the dispute.
I'm afraid that President Trump shows no serious interest in the effort to reconcile the tensions between RK and Japan.
That's a signal of the United States weakening leadership in this region, and then also the Japan didn't really pay respect to that kind of the U.S. leadership in this region. So they try to have their own security strategies to push further. So this is a worrisome situation for South Koreans' perspective.
Do you think what will make the security scenario even worse is the serious and apparent lack of a regional security mechanism? Following the end of the six-party talks, which aimed to fix the issue of nuclear disarmament, there hasn't been such a similar mechanism. Do you think this is likely to be a, you know what I mean? It's likely to cause uncertainty. And we don't have proper channels, no solutions. So do you think this year we'll see the convergence of the heads of the three states in Northeast Asia, Japan, RK, and China? Because as scheduled, the three government heads are likely to meet and talk about the regional integration. Due to the disputes between Seoul and Tokyo, are you pessimistic about the prospects of having this summit?
Not really. Due to the U.S.-China strategic competition, and I start worrying about the more optimistic outcome. Now it is relatively pessimistic, and then also we hope China has a new vision to the regional people, and then to beyond the Chinese own national interest. And so China must maybe show us a kind of a way to have peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. And as you suggested, the parallel approach, and maybe do something more. And then the second one is China. We hope China to establish a kind of a regional mechanism for economic prosperity, and then including Japan and South Korea together, and then as a form of regional cooperation. And third one is maybe China also provide a certain opportunity to further regional security and peace building, and then maybe we can be much more creative in the world of without the United States, without alliance system, and we may face in the future sooner or later. Then maybe who is going to fill the vacuum? This is the key question. But maybe China is one of the most capable countries at this moment we can think. But still, the image of a sharp power of China still remains strong in this region. So China must do. We really expect something better, something good. Maybe we expect much more. But anyway, China is now in a kind of a situation to face these kind of challenges.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.